What is the worst example of rich people problems you have seen? I knew someone who traded in his Porsche and bought a new one every year. His parents were wealthy, died when he was in his teens, and left him a multi-million-dollar trust fund. What was sad was that he felt that he couldn't pick up women without flashing his cash and expensive sports car, but he would dump them all in a couple of weeks because they were only into me for my money. Loneliest guy I ever met. Edit, he is not Batman. His parents died in a car accident, and his butler's name is Davin, not Alfred.
It's interesting how money can shape relationships. He had everything but still felt empty. Always chasing validation through his possessions, but in the end, it left him isolated. It's funny how people can have so much yet feel so little. Just goes to show that wealth doesn't guarantee connection or happiness. That's the reality for some, even with a fast car and a trust fund.
I had friends who had to break their phone. It was the latest iPhone model and perfectly working, but there was a newer one coming out that they wanted, and their parents would only buy it if their other one was broken. I had to endure these kids throwing their phones against walls and being frustrated that their phone wasn't broken yet.
That's a wild story. I remember when my friends did something similar. They wanted the latest gadget, but their old ones still worked fine. It was just crazy watching them act all dramatic, smashing perfectly good phones. They were so focused on getting the new one, they couldn't see the waste. It's surprising how far some people will go for a new device.
My friend wants to marry her boyfriend. They're going to school in America, but are both from China. Her Beijing him near Shanghai-ish. They both pay $60,000 here to go to high school here. However, she can't marry him because his family only owns 2 houses in Hangzhou, whereas hers owns 7 in Beijing. Frowny face, edit. Rich people benefits. A lot of the other students simply buy their citizenship, obviously illegally, if they're not the brightest and can't get into the esteemed American schools their parents expect. Edit 2. OHP, apparently one can legitimately buy their citizenship. Who knew? However, it seems like it takes a long time, whereas the students will be going to school here next year. I'm not sure of the details. Frowny face.
That's a wild situation. It's crazy how family background can influence personal choices, especially with marriage. The pressure to keep up appearances in that kind of wealthy circle must be intense too. And yeah, the loophole with citizenship is interesting. Just shows how money can change things. High school should be about learning, not all this extra drama. Hope they figure it out without too much stress.
When I was in high school, my family was pretty poor, and I had a fairly rich friend. My single dad spent years saving up for us to go to Disneyland. We finally went when I was 16. Fast forward a year, my friend is going to Disneyland for Halloween break. Her dad told her to invite 2 friends, so she invited me and another girl. I was freaking stoked, but she kept saying, I don't know, it's probably going to be boring. My grandma takes me to Disneyland like every break. And when we got there, all she wanted to do was sit on benches and text. All of the rides were boring, and she'd already been on them dozens of times. It ended up being pretty boring for me, because I didn't want to go on the rides without her.
That sounds like a frustrating experience. It's rough when you get so hyped for something, but then it doesn't match your expectations. You finally get to go to a place like Disneyland, and your friend isn't even into it. Makes you wish you'd gone with someone who shares the excitement. I guess it's a reminder that experiences can be different for everyone, even if they seem amazing on paper.
Young girl, about 5 years of age, getting ready to go into New York City to visit her grandmother in Jay's suburbs. She was at her aunt's house and did not have a pair of shoes that she liked. She called her chauffeur, told him which pair of shoes she wanted. The dude got the shoes and drove some 20 miles to deliver them, and she told him he got the wrong ones, and he was an idiot. No one in the family thought this was inappropriate.
It's kind of wild how kids can be so blunt. This little girl wanted her shoes and didn't hold back when the chauffeur brought the wrong pair. It's funny how her family didn't think much of it. Just shows how some people grow up in different environments where they feel free to speak their minds. It's a strange mix of innocence and entitlement. Makes you wonder how she'll turn out.
Watch The Queen of Versailles. It's riveting and all about rich people problems. And it's not about Marie Antoinette, as the title would suggest. It's a documentary about a ridiculously rich family before and during the Great Recession and the effect that the housing crisis had on them. Edit, whoops. I'm usually a stickler for effect versus effect. Edit. There you go, I actually fixed the error.
I remember watching that doc with a friend. We laughed at the absurdity of their problems, but also felt a bit sorry for them. It's wild how a housing crisis can shake up even the richest. They had everything, yet still faced struggles. Kind of puts things in perspective for me, you know? Makes you appreciate the simpler stuff in life.
A person I know only drinks Evian or Voss water because he is allergic to tap. Edit. I am not ripping on him for not drinking tap, but for only drinking what is regarded as luxury water. Edit 2. He lives in a wealthy neighborhood in America. Edit 3. Once again, I am perfectly fine with him only drinking bottled water. He may be allergic to something in tap, for what I know. I just find it crazy that he will only drink certain kinds of bottled water.
I have a friend who's pretty similar. Only drinks cold-pressed juice or artisan coffee, claims normal drinks just don't sit right. It's fine if that's what he likes, but it can be a bit over the top. I get it if he's got preferences, but it's kind of wild when you're at a gathering and everyone else is just grabbing a soda or some tap water. Just a different vibe, I guess.
Superyacht docked in Italy at a high-end marina. Owners wanted the bottled Perrier water for a party they were having in a day or two. They wanted the marina to supply them with a pallet of said water. Marina said it was against policy for them to get a pallet of water to their boat. So they get a private jet from America to fly in a pallet of said water and get it dropped to the boat. Price was about $28,000 as far as I remember. But even that amount seems low for that.
That's a wild story. It's interesting how people go to such lengths for something as simple as bottled water. You wouldn't think a pallet of Perrier would be that big of a deal. But I guess when you have a yacht and a party to throw, you don't really think about costs. A private jet for water does seem over the top, but that's just how some people operate. Just another day in the high life, I suppose.
Drove a client's wife home from the airport after the first big snowstorm in Boston this year. I felt so bad as she told me, "Oh, Roger is so sad. They could only clear the snow from in front of 2 of our garage bays. He wanted to take his BMW out, but he's stuck driving my Mercedes for another week." Oh, well, how does he go on?
Sounds like Roger has a rough time with his cars. Guess he'll have to deal with the Mercedes for now. It's a shame when the snow comes in and messes up plans. I mean, it's just a week, but I can see how he'd be bummed about it. Just chalk it up to winter woes, I guess.
Had a former friend who went into despair because Hurricane Sandy flooded her living room of her childhood home. Told everyone she was homeless now, and she knew what it felt like to lose everything the way her Jewish ancestors did in World War II. Thing is, she had an apartment she lived in on the island. Her parents owned several more vacation homes up and down the coast. They were a little inconvenienced maybe, but far from homeless.
It's interesting how people sometimes exaggerate their struggles. This friend claimed she was homeless after the hurricane, connecting it to something much deeper. But the reality was quite different. She had an apartment, and her family owned multiple homes. It makes you think about the ways people frame their experiences and the need for validation. Maybe it's just easier to be dramatic than to admit everything is actually okay.
I was invited to a graduation party, hosted by a very wealthy couple whose daughter had just graduated from Yale. Her father came out in front of the guests, displaying his Rolex and Cartier watches, asking which one of the two expensive watches the group thought would be the more appropriate for the occasion. Everyone just looked at each other, silently, not quite sure what to say.
That sounds pretty awkward. It's like he was trying to show off, but everyone was just uncomfortable. It's strange how some people feel the need to flaunt their wealth instead of just enjoying the moment. I guess it's tough when wealth comes with these kinds of social expectations. It probably made the whole party feel a bit off. Sometimes people just want to celebrate without the distractions.
I work for a nonprofit that helped extremely low-income women start their own business. These women would give up food to scrape together enough money to join our program. One of our EDs said she wished she could relate to our clients more, but she has never been poor. She owned 2 homes in one of the most expensive zip codes in the U.S. Also, another woman whom I really did respect, but not always agree with, believed people chose to be in poverty. We would debate for days about that statement. I realized working there that people who run advocacy programs for poverty have no idea what it's really like. This is a problem because policy and lawmakers are looking at these institutions for advisement on drafting new social safety nets and welfare programs to help the working poor, but they just have no clue. It motivated me to go back and get a master's degree to fight this. I grew up super poor and can speak from experience, not theory.
It's interesting how some people in advocacy seem disconnected from the realities they claim to address. I've seen it before, where those in charge don't truly get the struggles of the very people they aim to help. It's frustrating, especially when decisions affecting lives are made without genuine understanding. Your experience resonates. Going back for a master's to bring real insight sounds like a solid plan. It's important to have voices that really know the struggle.
I live in a part of my country where internet is really expensive. 16 megabits per second plans are considered plans for extremely rich people. One fine day, one of my friends threw a fit at his dad because he was getting 15 megabits per second instead of 16 for like an hour. Holy shit, dude, I live on a 2 megabits per second connection, which turns into a 512 kbps connection after a 30 GB data cap.
It's wild how different our internet situations can be. My friend thinks 15 megabits per second is a tragedy, while I'm over here just hoping to load a web page without it timing out. I remember getting so frustrated when my connection would drop while I was trying to watch a video. It's just not easy sometimes, especially when you're trying to keep up with everything online.
To know if this is a problem exactly, but I was on the tube in South London and a bunch of young banker types in fancy suits were there with their equally well-dressed arm candy girlfriends, and one guy was like, everyone keeps telling me to get a Bentley, but I'm more of a Lumbo man. This was at a point in my life where I was living off 1-pound boxes of pasta from Tesco, so it was a bit of a surreal moment.
Yeah, that sounds like one of those moments you don't forget. Being surrounded by people who are living a totally different life while you're just trying to get by with cheap meals really puts things into perspective. It's kind of funny how some people focus on flashy cars while others are just aiming for basic needs. Makes you realize what really matters sometimes.
I'm a nanny for a rich family. A few examples when I get paid in cash. My boss says, man, now I'm gonna have to go all the way to the bank to get more cash. When they travel, they prefer 2-bedroom suites. One time they could only get a 1-bedroom, and he said, well, that just ruins the whole trip. My car got broken into, and I mentioned it felt so awful to drive it knowing someone was in it. His idea of empathizing? That happened to me. I had to buy a new one. Edit. Not wanting to go to the bank isn't the annoying rich thing. It was annoying rich thing because he had $500 still in his wallet, and it was annoying that he was complaining it wasn't enough money to have in his wallet. Edit 2. Some of you have asked me to do an AMA, So I am now up on Slash, or Slash Casual IMA. If you want to know more, please feel free to ask me anything.
It's interesting how some people are so out of touch with everyday struggles. Your boss complaining about bank trips with that much cash on hand says a lot. It's like they can't grasp normal. Traveling in 2 suites just because of a 1-bedroom? That's next level. And the car break-in sympathy? Just a reminder that wealth can really blind people to reality. It seems like you have some odd experiences with them.
Was at a marina in the Bahamas to do laundry, stock up on water and supplies with my 25-year-old beater sailboat. Was walking the dog when I met a guy walking his dog. He was off of a 140-foot boat with substantial, crisply uniformed crew and could not stop complaining how the Bahamas government had charged him $250 for a 6-month cruising permit/fishing license. Same rate I paid, by the way. He went on and on, how they don't have lighthouses, buoys, etc. He had to be paying that much to dock for the night, let alone crew and fuel. Boat probably cost $10 million or more. I ended the conversation by saying I had paid more than that for the bottom paint, which kept barnacles from growing on my hull.
Met a guy at a marina in the Bahamas. I was just doing laundry with my old sailboat. He had a huge yacht and complained about a $250 cruising permit. He went on about lighthouses and costs. I finally mentioned I paid more for bottom paint to keep my boat clean. It was a weird contrast between our experiences. Sometimes it feels like money can't buy you ease, just more headaches.
I live next to one of the greatest wealth per capita places in the world. A guy over on the island had the problem of his priceless art in his winter home being in vague danger from potential hurricanes, and he wasn't comfortable with the idea of it being moved out of the house when a hurricane was coming. His solution was to buy a decommissioned submarine and have it buried underneath his estate, then have a hallway built to it. And that's the place he puts his most valuable art pieces at this particular home if there was an impending hurricane.
That's an interesting approach to art preservation. Seems like the guy's really invested in keeping his collection safe, even if it seems a bit extreme. I guess when you have that much wealth, you can get creative with solutions. A submarine buried under your house sounds like something out of a movie. It's just wild how people with money think differently about problems.
Was watching one of those rich version of MTV cribs. Couldn't remember the name of it. I think it was for RVs. Anyway, dude has 2 75-inch TVs on the same corner of a room, with one of the TVs on the left side of the corner and another on the other side of the corner. When asked why, he said, "It's too much work to change positions, so I put another TV on the other corner, so I only have to turn my head."
Sounds like a classic case of overthinking comfort. Instead of just moving a bit, he went all out to make it easier. I guess when you've got money, it's about finding ways to avoid the small hassles. It's interesting how lifestyle choices can be driven by convenience rather than necessity.
I work for a shipping company. This lady ordered a house full of new furniture that's coming her way. She didn't call to confirm time until the morning of delivery. She threw a fit. She first told me she ordered all kinds of stuff, and we shouldn't be in business because the Pony Express is faster, and she had been waiting a week for this stuff. When I offered first thing Monday, she said we might as well give it to the neighbors to enjoy since she won't be in town. I asked when she would be back, if that would be better, and she said, "I don't fucking know. This is for my second house."
It sounds like she really lost it over a delay. People can snap over things like furniture deliveries. I get it, waiting for new stuff can be frustrating, but it's kind of wild how she reacted. Seems like her stress came out in a big way. I hope when she gets back home, everything is smooth sailing for her. No need for that level of drama over a delivery.
My dad is a self-made millionaire. He accomplished it through hard work, and he raised me just as toughly as he didn't want me to depend on money. I have some experience with people of my status. One girl I know convinced her parents to move so she could be closer to the horse stable she liked to ride at. She upped her dad's drive to work, and her mom's, and her little brother had to change schools in 8th grade, the worst time to pull a kid out. Get this though, she made her mom buy her favorite horse. She also would try and make me buy her a horse, because I was rich and I didn't need my money like she did.
That's an interesting perspective on wealth and entitlement. It's wild how some people see money as a way to get whatever they want, regardless of the impact on others. I mean, asking someone else to buy you a horse just because they have money is pretty out there. I guess that kind of mindset shows a lot about how people can view relationships and support when it comes to money.
I attended a wedding of a close relative. It was decided that the bridesmaids and the bride would have too little privacy while dressing for the ceremony. So the farm down the road a bit was purchased so the farmhouse could be used for dressing. This was in the Bay Area, CA. I didn't say a word. If you can do that, I'm genuinely impressed.
It's interesting how things can get planned for an event like that. I mean, a whole farmhouse just for some privacy. You never really think about the logistics of dressing spaces at weddings. It's all about the details, I guess. People often forget that the behind-the-scenes stuff can be as important as the ceremony itself. It's a memorable way to keep everyone comfortable. Pretty smart move, really.
A former managet at work bought a Viper when they first came out, and he scared himself in it one day by oversteering a curve and essentially doing a 180 on a public street. His Land Rover Defender was in the paint shop, so he shows up to work in his Duesenberg Model J. Looked like a Nazi staff car in the manager parking spot.
That's an interesting situation. A guy getting a Viper and then almost losing it on a turn is pretty intense. And switching to a Duesenberg Model J while his Land Rover is in the shop must have turned some heads. Definitely not your average commute. I wonder how people reacted seeing that classic car in the lot. It's not every day you see a ride like that at work.
I installed and maintained a huge koi pond. I should say mini lake. It was huge for a very well-off family. They also had those stupid high-stepping show horses. One of their six-figure show horses busted out at night as one of the kids had not latched the gate properly and proceeded to drown itself in the koi pond. It had vertical sides because of raccoons. They immediately wanted to sue somebody, and the staff had to sit down, and the horse guy and myself were like, not our bad. Next month, there's another six-figure replacement horse in the paddock.
That sounds like a wild situation. You really got caught in the middle of someone else's drama. It's crazy how people look for someone to blame instead of just accepting accidents happen. At least you got to see them replace the horse without any real consequences. Just another day in the life of dealing with rich folks and their problems, I guess.
Bought their neighbor's house so they could live in it for 5 months while their Real house was being remodeled. Then they demolished it and put in pool. They were apparently billionaires. Edit. Also, Mrs. Homeowner was furious. Eddie, I can't live like this. But the stone we were laying didn't exactly match the stone in their courtyard. 1. We don't pick out the stone, the homeowners do. 2. The stone she wanted didn't exist anymore, and she was aware of that fact.
Sounds like quite a situation with the neighbors. Buying a house just to live in it temporarily, and then tearing it down for a pool is something else. Mrs. Homeowner seems a bit dramatic, too, especially about the stone. It's tough when expectations don't match reality, but if she knew the stone wasn't available, that's on her. Just wild how some people handle renovations and all that stress.
I bought a luxury car, finding out, oh, that's why there's still premium at the pumps. Your story just made me shiver a little. But yeah, going too low on the octane is bad for an engine for a lot of sports and luxury cars. Bentleys seem to have 23-gallon tanks. For a cheaper gas station, she would have said $4.60, premium being around a 20 cents per gallon extra cost. for a full tank. For a gas station with a higher cost for premium, I'm assuming around 90 cents per gallon, and those do exist, she would have saved around $20. Not worth it for a car that expensive at it. Not criticizing the poster. Mostly FYI for those that have never had a car that required it.
I get where you're coming from. A friend of mine bought a similar luxury car and was shocked by the gas prices. He couldn't believe the difference in cost when filling up. We joked about it, but he learned the hard way about using the right fuel. It's funny how something as simple as gas can really hit your wallet, especially when you drive a car that's all about performance.
Simple answer to his problem would be to keep his wealth a secret. He should just live as though he makes $30K a year and see what kind of women start to exist around him. Then when they start dating, they can be pleasantly surprised. The problem, though, is that those expensive items start to own the people that have them as much as the people who own them.
That kind of makes sense. Sometimes, the more you have, the more pressure there is to keep up appearances. Living under the radar could change the whole dating game for him. It's interesting how material stuff can shift priorities in relationships, too. If he can find someone who isn't focused on the flashy things, that might lead to something real. Just a different perspective on how wealth can impact connections.
I went to a fine dining restaurant a few years back that offered us a chance to look at their water menu before dinner. My wife immediately said no, because obviously we're not ordering fancy water off the water menu. Still kind of disappointed we didn't at least look at it. That had to have been hilarious.
That sounds like a classic moment. I remember going out with some friends and they were hesitating over the drinks menu. One guy said no to the fancy cocktails, just ordering soda. It felt like we missed out on a fun experience. Sometimes it's the little things that could have made the night memorable, but we ended up laughing about it later. Just funny how we second-guess these choices.
I had a friend who was given roughly $200 a week from her parents every week, which isn't a lot, but it's quite a bit when you don't have any bills at 24. They also bought her car for her, paid her insurance, she lived rent-free, gave her mom a grocery list every week, so she didn't have to eat what they were making for dinner. She's been dating a guy in prison for the last 2 years.
That's an interesting situation. It's wild how some people have it really easy while others struggle. I can't imagine living that way at 24, just completely taken care of. The relationship with someone in prison adds another layer. I wonder what kind of dynamic that creates. Feels like there's a lot going on there. Sometimes, though, it makes you think about how different life paths can be.
I live in Vancouver. This sort of shit doesn't surprise me at all. The ultra-rich Chinese have dramatically changed the cultural and economic landscape of Vancouver. You know it's bad when the mainlanders, Hong Kongers, and Taiwanese who moved here to become Canadians all agree that they don't like the most recent wave of nouveau riche from the mainland who are mostly here to get away from the pollution and park their money in real estate out of the reach of their own government. Seeing dozens of students at UBC drive top gear grade exotic supercars to class is just normal these days.
It's wild how money can shift the vibe of a place. Vancouver feels like a different world now with these new arrivals. It's strange to see people who are supposed to be students rolling up in supercars. Just a sign of changing priorities, I guess. Makes you wonder about the real essence of education versus just flexing wealth.
This movie was so sad to me. Kids unexcited for Christmas because they received gifts they literally already had 2 or more of. The moments that really killed were the ones where the family would try to communicate with the father, and he would tell them to go away as he sat there plugged into work in his dark, crowded office.
Yeah, that kind of family dynamic hits hard. It reminds me of a time when a friend was really focused on work, and it felt like we lost touch. We'd hang out, but he was always on his phone or distracted. It was tough seeing someone I cared about drift away like that. Sometimes, it feels like we miss the real moments for the sake of productivity.
Depending on the promotions, it makes a lot more sense to pay for college using credit cards that have 0% financing on balance transfers, with cash back on balances of $5K or more. You can keep churning through cards and not pay as much as the ridiculous unsubsidized loan rates. I'd rather pay 0% on a credit card while I pay off tuition than be charged an origination fee and almost 6% April.
Yeah, I've seen people do similar things with credit cards to manage tuition costs. It's interesting to watch how people strategize around finances. Using cards with 0% interest can definitely save money in the long run. I get the appeal of avoiding those high loan rates. Just gotta be careful though. It can get messy if you aren't on top of payments. Balancing it all is key.
Apparently, there are a lot of rich people that have so little problems, they just make them up. I think it's human nature to perceive anything to be a problem if it is worse than our expectations, regardless of wealth or class. I imagine that a lot of the problems that an average poor American has would seem made up to many, many people in less fortunate countries.
I get what you mean. It's interesting how perspective works. A lot of people create their own issues to complain about, especially when life is too easy. Meanwhile, someone struggling in a different part of the world would probably laugh at the things we stress over. It just shows how relative problems are, depending on your situation. It's all about where you stand in life.
Apparently, there are a lot of rich people that have so little problems, they just make them up. This isn't a property of rich people. It applies to most people. I had this epiphany one day when I saw a homeless man upset with his hobbling dog because it was walking too slow to keep up with him on his bike. He was inventing drama, just like the soccer moms in their SUVs and the rich guy whose new Porsche doesn't match his Rolex.
It's interesting how people can create issues no matter their circumstances. I remember seeing someone in a fancy car arguing over a minor inconvenience. Meanwhile, I saw a guy struggling to get by, and he was making a big deal over a small thing too. It really shows that everyone has their own dramas, whether they're wealthy or not. Seems like we all just look for something to complain about sometimes.
I knew a guy who had a friend/roommate like that. He recognized the opportunity and had kind of turned himself into an informal personal assistant. He took care of all the details of making things happen for his rich kid friend, while skimming a reasonable living for himself. The way he described it, it didn't sound like he was doing anything unethical. He was just maximizing his friend's enjoyment of spending his allowance, part of the cost of which was paying for his time managing the details of setting up parties, trip planning, researching products, etc.
That's an interesting setup. It's like he was the behind-the-scenes guy, making everything smooth for his friend. Sure, it had its perks, and it sounds like both got what they wanted out of it. One got to enjoy life, and the other managed the chaos while earning a steady income. Not a bad arrangement if you can pull it off.
My great-aunt said the same thing once. They do own a ton of land, though. I joke about it when I drive across their ranch to go fishing. I tell whoever I'm with, God, it's such a pain having this much land. It takes forever to get to the lake. It always gets me. But the drive is like 30 minutes, which is actually annoying.
That sounds pretty relatable. You're just trying to enjoy some fishing, but the trek can be a hassle. It's funny how those big places come with their own set of problems. I guess having too much land isn't as easy as it seems. Still, a 30-minute drive is kind of a lot when all you want is to be by the water.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.